Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Former FBI Director James Comey's book is set to release this week, but the text of that book has already leaked. The book is titled A Higher Loyalty, but in the words of Nate Silver at 538, it might be called A Higher Royalty. Comey says he has the important message that President Trump is unethical and unfit for the presidency, yet he waited a year to deliver that message to the rest of us. Why? Maybe to maximize his personal financial benefit. Fox chief national correspondent Ed Henry has been following this since the beginning, and he joins us now.
Tucker, great to see you. The real headline from Comey's book may be there's not much new or damaging for President Trump. Legally, there could be political damage, though, of course. In fact, the former FBI director takes a lot of personal pot shots that may backfire on him, like suggesting the president is shorter, has smaller hands, and more of a fake suntan than he first surmised. Comey charges the president is unethical and untethered to the truth and institutional values, all of which led the president to unload on the man he fired today on Twitter, calling him an untruthful slimeball, and added it was his, quote, great honor to fire James Comey. While Press Secretary Sarah Sanders called Comey a disgraced partisan hack who is a self-admitted leaker on a PR tour to, as you suggested, pad his bank account. The book could also be trouble for former Obama Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who felt the need earlier this week to do an interview trying to explain her tarmac meeting with former President Bill Clinton in the middle of the Hillary Clinton email probe. Comey had to take more of a personal role in the server investigation, he says, because of something involving Lynch that he writes in the book is a development still unknown to the American people. Meanwhile, more problems for Comey's former number 2 at the FBI, Andrew McCabe. A scathing report came out today from the Justice Department Inspector General, which found McCabe lied 4 different times about his role confirming the existence of the FBI's separate probe of the Clinton Foundation. The president tweeted about that. DOJ just issued the McCabe report, which is a total disaster. He lied. McCabe was totally controlled by Comey. McCabe is Comey. No collusion, all made up by this den of thieves and lowlifes, the president says. Meanwhile, Fox News has confirmed the president today telephoned his longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen, to, they say, check in. The New York Times, though, notes this could cause new problems for the president, since defense attorneys usually tell their clients don't talk to one another during a criminal probe. Lawyers representing Cohen and the president were in a Manhattan courtroom today trying to stop the Justice Department from going through documents seized during a series of FBI raids. Prosecutors also revealed they had already gotten secret search warrants before the raids to go through several of Cohen's email accounts. The president has called this a witch hunt, and the man in the crosshairs for approving the raids of Cohen's materials is Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general. A source close to him tells Fox tonight he does not believe he'll be fired tonight, though he's told confidants in recent days he's ready to accept any outcome from the president. Tucker?
Oh, the drama. Thank you, Ed.
Who goes on?
There's a lot going on, but what have we learned about Jim Comey from his book and the interviews he's done about the book? Well, maybe the most shocking fact of all is how banal he is. Comey ran the most powerful law enforcement agency in America. He was a central player in the last presidential election and in its aftermath ever since. You'd think you'd be impressed when he speaks, even if you don't agree with him. But no. Jim Comey is as conventional as they come. We know that now. His interviews sound like Chelsea Clinton doing a Q&A with Us Weekly. Comey says his literary hero is, brace yourself, Atticus Finch, because apparently he couldn't think of anything more cliched than that. You couldn't either. He says he wishes Trump would read the New York Times op-ed page. He recommended Sheryl Sandberg's lean in to his staff at the FBI, seriously, and he says he'd like to have Sandberg to a dinner party, and so on and on. This is America's top G-man, or was? He sounds like every other sensitive, guilt-ridden, middle-aged suburban liberal. Not impressive at all. Maybe that's why Comey did not hesitate before destroying any remaining public trust in the FBI in order to sell this book. The FBI directors are not supposed to let emotion and political considerations influence government investigations, but Comey doesn't even hide it. He admits his behavior in the fall of 2016 may have been colored by his desire to make Hillary Clinton, quote, a legitimate president. So that settles that. There's now nobody in either party, Republican or Democrat, who will ever again think the Clinton investigation was conducted fairly. Thanks, Jim Comey. Or the Russia investigation, for that matter. Here's what Comey told ABC about that. Watch.
Did you tell him that the Steele dossier had been financed by his political opponents?
No. I didn't even think I used the term Steele dossier. I just talked about additional material.
But did he have a right to know that?
That it had been financed by his political opponents? I don't know the answer to that. It wasn't necessary for my goal, which was to alert him that we had this information.
Telling the truth, says Jim Comey, quote, wasn't necessary for my goal. Apparently it wasn't. Whatever else you think about Donald Trump or his administration or whatever, you ought to be happy that that guy, Jim Comey, is no longer running the FBI. Alan Dershowitz is a lawyer and professor emeritus at Harvard Law School, as well as author of Trumped Up, How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. We spoke to him just a minute ago. Professor, do the things that Comey has said and written since he left the FBI confirm the decision to fire him from the FBI?
No, it should have been done much, much earlier. It should have been done on the day of the inauguration, and it should have reflected itself in the fact that nobody should ever have appointed him to be head of the FBI. This is a man who is revenge-driven, who was prepared to leak through a law professor at Columbia, who was prepared to disclose confidential conversations he had with the president-elect and the president of the United States. He's exactly the wrong person to have headed the most important law enforcement agency in the United States. This sends a horrible message to FBI agents and law enforcement people about leaking and about confidences and about trying to keep emotion out of law enforcement and politics out of law enforcement. To me, the worst part of it is when he both compares the president to a mob boss, which proves my point of Trumped Up, that you can create crimes out of almost anything and call a mob boss somebody who's running the presidency of the United States. And the fact that he is willing to say on television that it's possible that the president was with prostitutes in a hotel room with, urination and all that. He's the head of the FBI. He knows the truth. He has seen all the secrets. And for him to start speculating on that kind of nonsense and rubbish, and not to disclose when he spoke to the president, as you said, that this information was paid for by a political opponent. I used to have a good feeling about Comey. I met him a few times when he was in Boston. I now have only very strong negative feelings about him, and he just enhances the suspicion that I think so many Americans now have of law enforcement. And we ought to be trusting law enforcement, and nobody today would trust Comey with secrets or confidences.
So if he were alleging that the president were acting like a mob boss, calling hits out on people committing crimes, that'd be one thing. But he's in effect criticizing the way the president talks. He's from Queens. He does actually sound like a mob boss sometimes because he's from that part of the country.
Hey, I'm
that's
from
not
Brooklyn. Hey,
exactly.
Come on, right.
There you go. No, but that's the point, kind of. Should law enforcement officials be making comments like this at all? I mean, doesn't it detracts from the entire organization that they purportedly represent?
And, the idea of revealing these secrets, it's not 30 years later when he's writing for history the way Henry Kissinger has done and others have done. This is a gossipy, revenge, make money quick, get even, hurt your political opponents, raise questions about the politicization of the Justice Department and the FBI. It's the worst possible book at the worst possible time for the worst possible reasons. We hear a lot about corrupt motives that can't make a presidential act into a crime. But talk about Comey's motives. Have anybody asked him about his motives, why he wrote this book? Why does he feel it's important for the American public to hear about information that he has no idea whether it's truthful or not? It's really scandalous and shameful, and I'm so disappointed with him.
So he has a lot of friends in the FBI, and we know that because the emails between them were FOIA'd, and now we have access to them. Shouldn't it make us nervous because he is now a political figure? He's chosen to become one. What about, Americans who like Trump? Should they be worried about getting equal treatment from FBI officials who are sympathetic to Jim Comey?
Well, the problem is, of course, it's not a problem. FBI agents are human. Law enforcement people are human. There are pro-Trump people in the FBI. There are anti-Trump people. They all take an oath not to allow politics or personal views to get in the way of their job. And here we see the former director letting his political and personal, I don't think they're partisan views, they're get-even views, get in the way of their job. And when you combine that with the Strzok disclosures, when you combine that with some of the other disclosures, it may serve a good purpose because it tells us the FBI agents are not what we see in stereotypes in the movies. They're real human beings with passions, but we have to figure out a way of making it so clear that these civil servants who sacrifice their lives have to keep their politics at home and their passions at home and their personal views at home. And this just moves the conversation in the wrong direction.
I agree, and makes a lot of people paranoid for good reason. Professor, thank you for coming on. Great to see you.